Looks like we're live. Thanks, guys, for joining me on a Saturday morning. For Steyn, he said it's really early to get up. I guess for Jason and I, being parents, nothing's early, right? um, but yeah, thanks again, guys, for joining me on this walkthrough, and thanks for testing the case. This was a tough week. We pretty much had Steyn's case lined up, but then said, such a good case, and it's a bit more intricate, so let's keep it for the finals. Let's make it a bit of an easier case. I didn't want the case to be as easy as the Rugby World Cup one, because the Rugby World Cup, some of the international guys said it was nice and simple, nice and easy. Received some comments around the fact that the bonus questions could be done without doing the rest. Was a nice addition. I think this case was similar as well. The bonus questions could also be tackled separately. And what I actually saw is the guys that could get the bonus questions as well as level 1 would qualify and would be top 10. So, I mean, a lot of the guys placed 3rd, 4th, 5th, thereabout, they actually just solved bonus questions and maybe level 1. And that sort of opens your mind up to how do you attempt it, because in the finals, we will definitely make it so that the people that get bonus questions first, when you verse each other, that person will actually take those points, and the other person won't be able to score it. So that makes it an interesting dynamic. Do you then start with bonus questions? Because the other problem is, if the bonus question is really difficult, it might actually throw you, and you might have too little time for the rest. So it's a strategic game. But yeah, we had a tough week because on Sunday we decided it's too difficult. So Monday morning early, I started with a new case. Tuesday morning early, finished it. I was spending Monday evening on it as well. You guys tested on Tuesday. Wednesday I set up the flexi quiz. Thursday we had the competition, so it was tough, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't have any issues on the cases, that the flexi quiz was working perfectly, and it seemed like everything went smoothly. So very happy about that, but very tiresome as well. And then it ended up not being such an easy case. I think a lot of guys struggled with the special characters. A lot of guys that sort of line breaks through you. But as I told both of you as well, to call yourself an Excel expert, I think you have to have the ability to deal with, someone called it dirty data. I don't necessarily think it's dirty in this case, but you have to be able to deal with special weird things that come your way. You will find sometimes that you will open up a document, there'll be merged cells, there'll be special characters, there'll be line breaks. How do you deal with that as an Excel specialist? I don't know, Jason, if you have any thoughts around that.
Yeah, I was having a bit of a debate with guys at work yesterday, actually, about, how much of Excel do you think you actually know? And we sort of agreed it's so user specific, and I think what you find is people tend to get really specialist in things that they do day to day, but don't know anything else, or know everything else at a really, really sort of high level. And when people ask me, like, why do you do these competitions? That's one of the main reasons. It's because I focus so much on a very niche area of project finance, financial modeling in my work, and would never ever get exposed to things like lambdas and lets and the new functions and just general problem solving techniques. I would never see that stuff because it's not sort of the way it's done in my specific field historically. But the stuff evolves because you learn new tricks, right? And so I think opening up your mind to the broader possibilities of just general problem solving has been incredibly helpful. And as you say, you can be an expert in one's very, very niche thing and not know 80% of the rest of Excel, kind of thing. And that sort of starts to show itself a bit in these competitions.
Yeah, and I mean, Steyn, you also said you didn't even know about text after because you don't typically use it in your line of work. I mean, you're more on the financial management side of things. So Excel for you is much different than Excel is for me, and then Excel is for Jason. And that sort of agility and versatility of the product is what makes it so amazing. I mean, in the week I had an interview with a magazine who wants to actually post an article about the South African Excel Championship, and I said, to me, it's the best piece of software that's ever been written, and it keeps on improving. This week we saw from Joe McDade, I saw new updates. It's so cool. Like, and typically it's I sort of laugh at myself for geeking out on these things, but it's going to change the way that I do my work going forward, and it's so powerful. And you make a good point. I mean, for the finals, I want to actually introduce the need to use either Office Scripts, VBA, or Power Query. You can use either of them, but to me, to call yourself a specialist or an expert, you have to be a bit of a generalist as well. And that's where we want to go with this competition as well. We want to introduce people to new things. I had someone contact me in the week saying, "Can you please give me some training? Because I give Excel training for a living, and I haven't seen these things. Like, a lot of people don't even know about data tables before joining this competition, and it's such a powerful tool to have in your tool belt. Just makes it it makes the tool so much more versatile and so much more usable in your tool belt as well." Steyn, any particular thoughts around the case in general? What was interesting for you? What was difficult? What do you think were the biggest challenges, I guess? Because when I built this case, I thought it's simple, right? It's a board of 100 blocks. You move up or you move down. You hit a snake, you go up. You hit a ladder. Oh, sorry, you hit a ladder, you go up. You hit a snake, you go down. We give you the exact cell where you're going to. What made it difficult?
Well, I think what was interesting about this case is that it keeps adding new variations. So if you build the model that solves the level 4 and 5 questions, you can apply that model to your earlier questions.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we spoke about that. I love cases where you don't have to build 5 models. I prefer a case where if you have the ability to build for level 5, you can apply that across, and even the bonus questions in this case. So only bonus question 2 had to have maybe a little bit of a different approach. But yeah, let's get into the case, and let's talk about it. Because Steyn, I know that you sort of spoke about the fact that you built one model, and Jason, you sort of tried to dabble in lambdas a little bit. So that would have been interesting. But let's maybe for the guys who haven't seen the case, let's maybe just talk about it quickly. So again, like I said, this was modeled on snakes and ladders, or it was based on snakes and ladders. But making it South African again, called it Steppies and Pofadders, because I think that's very South African. I don't think there's another country where they call it Steppies. And Pofadders is a very local, very familiar snake, a very dangerous snake. So yeah, snakes and ladders, right? The sort of dice values were given to you, and that to me was a gift. And a lot of people didn't use it. A lot of people tried to model around that, but that was sort of given as a gift, because in certain cases, when you get these dice games, you have to prepare for it yourself. You have to go and split out the values, get 6 unique dices, and actually attach a value to them. Or you could use Dim's method. If you watch Dermot Early's video, we'll also link to that. You'll see that he actually used a unit char. And I think it's 9855. So if you do a uni char of this,
No, it would be Unicode.
Is it Unicode? Okay, yeah, you're right, Unicode. Yeah, because unit char would take it back to the the character.
And for those who don't know what the formula does, it converts it to a value. So it converts the symbol
Number.
to a value, and it works, to a number. And then, so it works for almost all characters in Excel. So if you have a strange character they haven't used yet, then you can use that to make it more manageable in some cases.
Yeah. So in other words, if you applied Unicode of the character and you deduct 9,855, you get 126. So that you can apply across all of them. Or you could just, like a normal person, you could just do a lookup. So what I like to do is I like to just call this dice, and I like to call this values. And then you can always refer to dice and values together, and it becomes your lookup. What other people have done, and I like that method as well, is they made this a table. So then when you make it a table, just name your table dice, for instance, or just D, and that just makes your formula simpler, and it just improves the fact that you don't have to lock your formulas. You don't have to worry about when you drag your formula down, am I actually still referring to the correct range? So that's just a bit of housekeeping up front. It takes 10 seconds of your time, but it makes all the difference in the end. So yeah, so the background is you've got 5 boards. Board 1's empty. Board 2 has only ladders. Board 3, snakes and ladders. Board 4, but same. And then board 5, just to make it interesting, because if you build the model for one, you could build the model for them all. Just to make it interesting, there's 1,000 blocks. And what makes it difficult, the only thing that makes it difficult in my book is the fact that there's line breaks. The characters are not supposed to throw you because it tells you whether it goes up or whether it goes down, right? So it's not one of those things where you have to model differently for snakes or for ladders. They are modeled the same. So you could get rid of them. And I know that some people did. I know, Steyn, you said you replaced them with S and P, right?
Well, I replaced them first with S and P, and then I realized I could just use S, because if it has a snake or a ladder, then you could just use the same formula to get the second value after the symbol.
Yeah. So you could just go and do a find and replace, select all, Control H, paste your snake or your ladder in there and replace it with nothing. Then you would still have the line breaks to deal with, but at least then you remove some of the clutter. And then that's pretty much it. I wanted to make it as simple as possible. So you start on block 1. You throw only 1 dice. Some of these games actually have 2 dice. Some of these games you have to open with throwing a 6 first. I didn't want to add intricacies like that. I wanted to make it simple. And the other thing is a player finishes on game block 100 by moving up with steps until they reach that block, or if they throw a dice to at least the quantity. So I didn't add the intricacy where you have to throw the exact number. So if you're a 96, you don't have to throw a 4. You can throw a 5 or a 6 as well, and that will also get you across the 100 and make you win. And then the questions, the bonuses actually asked for how many times did a player throw a 6. Again, I used the substitute trick from what you did, Steyn. What is the total number of pips thrown on all the dice? That you could just use your answer for what you got from level 1, and you could do that across all of them. I think people are still struggling with the principle of exclude your examples, because I know that some people actually. I saw one of the cases that I reviewed. The guy actually said remove anywhere where it starts with where the cell starts with EX. But now the problem here is these were merged cells. So again, as an Excel specialist, you sometimes have to deal with merged cells. So the problem here was if you remove the example, the example, or if you don't look at the word, then 183 doesn't contain the value example, because that actually sits in 182, and you can still take player 2's example values. And one of the players who was in the top 10 last week didn't make top 10 because of that. The rest of his answers were perfect. So, and then bonus 3, what is the total number of blocks one could progress across all the steppies on game board 2? and we'll sort of tackle that now as well. Okay, before I get on into my solution, Steyn, you want to show us your let me just make sure you can share the screen, and then you can show us your sort of one solve model, if I can call it that, and then after we can look at what Jason did when he was dabbling, he was trying to dabble in some lambdas.
Yes. So basically what I did is I put my case number or example game that I'm busy with, and then here on the board, I had a VLOOKUP where I specified which board to use, and there I used the VLOOKUP true function, where if it says if it's like a 72, then it defaults back to the previous value, which is 71. So that's something you use less often. And then based on a game board, I use the switch formula to, if it's 1, bring in board 1, 2, board 2, and then to bring in all the boards. And then the new line or the page break, I use this formula to substitute it out. So you can see as page break is Unicode 10, and then I turn it back into a Unicode to get back to page break, and then I say remove the page break so that I'm left with the values without the page break. And then to get my roles, I did a text split using the comma space, and then just did a VLOOKUP against that table with the values to get the values of the role. Here, I then did it where I took the previous position plus the role, and then I got what was the value, or what was in that block where the person lands. And then, as Renier mentioned, I used the text after to identify the cases where it had a S in. So as previously mentioned, I replaced all my steppies and ladders with S's. So then my overall formula, when I put it back together, was if it has a value here, then use that value. Otherwise, it doesn't have a snake or ladder, then use that value. So then I just put it all in a formula again, and then I was able to calculate all my positions after each roll. And then it was just a matter of doing all the questions. So the first one is just what was the total of the first 5 rolls, and then doing each question. And then just to make it more simpler, I think I put a formula where it only gives me the answer for each section. So then I didn't do like, I got 0 values here, so I don't calculate level 1 answers for game 11 and so onwards. And that's basically how I did my game.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the amount of work in this, half an hour is enough if you know how to set it up, right? Half an hour is enough. And again, Dim showed us that you could do it in 20 minutes if you're a superhuman. But yeah, Dim also, he's really upset with himself because he made the human mistake of not working with or not accounting for the merged cells. He was quite angry at himself, and I mean, I also
what he did.
What
he did was filtered. He filtered for all the dices, and to exclude the examples, he said if column B is a value, then take those values. But like Renier said, row 131 won't have a value because this 51 is sitting in 130. So then he excluded all the player 2 roles from his answers.
Yeah. So what's interesting is So what's interesting is I actually told them, the guys who dabble in Power Query, it might actually make sense when you deal with something like this to quickly pull the information into Power Query, make it one big table. Because with Power Query, you could basically take the whole sort of data set, you could pull down the merged cells so that it's 51-51. You can also put all the dice underneath one another because the player 1, player 2 also sort of threw the dice off one row to the right for level 4 and 5. And you can remove all the examples. So you could actually build yourself within 1 minute, maybe not even. You could build yourself a nice structured table that you could refer to, and then you have you've dealt with merged cells, you've put all the dice underneath one another, you've removed examples, so it's ready for modeling. So maybe it makes sense in future when you're working with data to pre-model it with a Power Query potentially. That's just the thought I had, and maybe I'll do a video on that, just showcasing how you could do that within a minute's time. So in the end, it becomes sort of a game management and a exam technique, right? Name your fields. You alluded to the fact that you also named your ranges, right? So if I can quickly steal back the share, and sorry, Jason, we'll get to you now. But I just did this morning before you started. So you saw that I basically called this dice and I called these values. Yeah, those ones I called values. And then, I mean, for board one, you didn't have to name this thing, but you could if you build a one model, you could do that. You call it board one, and for board two, this is exactly what I did this morning quickly. And then for board three, there I could go board three. A bit of game management, but then I don't have to worry about the ranges anymore. Board four, and then board five. And now that was just Control Shift down and right, and then to select all of it, and then board five. Or you could just potentially click and go Control A, and Excel is clever enough to take the data block and select it. And then I went and I built my model. And typically what I like to do is I like to work neatly like this, where I go game and board, and I just sort of color them so that I know that they're input cells and that I can refer back to it in future. And to do that, I basically just go and select both and go cell styles input. And then I know that's like universal language for these are my input values into the model. What I also did was I put chart 10, which is the line break in a block, and then I put the snake and the ladder in there, and I called these the limbs, like Jason did last week. And basically now I've got my limbs there. I could put this anywhere, didn't have to be part of my model. And then I used two col. In my original solution, I actually used 2 row, and I put them down there. I guess it's sort of your screen management. It's up to you. What's nice about using them as a column is you can actually see a lot more of the values quickly. You don't have to scroll across to see them, and you don't have to make your columns thinner. You didn't have to make your columns thinner to actually see a lot of the values. So then I did a 2 col, just did a substitute of that character 10. And interestingly enough, text after, text split, text before doesn't want that chart 10. Even if chart 10 is in my delimiters, doesn't want to work with that. And basically your substitute's your best bet there, just to remove the line breaks. And then I did a text split with a double dash or a double negative to make it numbers, to convert it into numbers. And I just split that after I've removed the line breaks, split them into separate values, and now I've got a nice structured value running down. And this can now work for all the boards, right? I can now put any board there. If I change this value, I've got board 3. If I change that value, I've got board 4. And what's nice is these are already numbers. So to solve question 2 or bonus question 2, I could just go and deduct these 2 from one another, and I've got that number. I just need to do that across all of them and do the sum of that, and I've got bonus question 3. There I've got that's how much time it took to get 120 points. Now I just needed 20 more to be in the top 10. That just puts things into perspective, right? So that's how quick game management actually improves your life. And now I can just work with these, as you showed as well, Steyn. So yeah, that's basic setup. Name your ranges, get your information structured, get it into a column of usable information, and now you could model. And this can now work for all 5 levels. You don't have to adjust anything. The questions are a little bit different, but you don't have to adjust anything for any of the levels, whether it's board 5 or whether it's board. So for board 5, the only sort of intricacy here is that it's now 1,000. So now the question is, how do I make sure that this goes down to 1,000? In this case, I wanted to do a text split across the dynamic range, but for some reason still the limiter split doesn't want to work. So if I select the sort of C5 hash to do it across the dynamic array, just want to show, then you'll see it doesn't split it out into the next column for any of the values. So it runs down to the 1,000, but it doesn't give my doesn't give my value after the text split. So that's why I did them separately like that, and I just pulled them down. And now I've got that solved for all 1,000. And then I know that it's difficult to work backwards. So now you could just do a sequence potentially. And you can sequence basically 1,000 rows. But now the problem is sometimes you work with 100, sometimes you work with 1,000. So I just did a count of the dynamic range, or you could do a count A because it includes special characters. So you could do a count A for the number of rows. You could start at the same sort of count A for the number of rows. And we sort of alluded to, when do you use a let function? The let function is used when we have to repeat things across, especially if it's a long calculation. If you want to repeat it across, you use the let function so that you can give it a name and you can refer back to it as the name. So in this case, I could have used the let function because I'm using count A C5 twice, but not necessary. And in this case, -1. And that would do a sequence. I don't know what I did now. This needs to be C5 hash. So that would dynamically spill it like that. Actually, I have to do it the other way around. But yeah, you get the gist. So in this case, we need to use from 1 backwards to 1,000. And in this case, now I could just index that, right? So I could just go the index of this array. Yeah, you get the gist. But anyway, so you get the index and you sort of split it around. I know that the Dim did it in a little bit of a different way, but he typically works very fast, and because he's doing it live, he doesn't necessarily have the ability or the time to explain everything he's doing. So it could go over your head. But I'll show my ultimate solution as well. Jason, you want to maybe share what you've done?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Just putting it up. Cool. So funny enough, I think I did a lot of what's been covered already. But as you said, Renier, I sort of try to challenge myself, not being under the pressure of being live in the competition, to try and do it more with sort of lambdas and lets and things like that, just to sort of dabble in the stuff really, and try and stretch myself a little bit, learning from the likes of Dermot's videos and things like that. And so I've taken, in fact, most of the concepts that you guys have already covered, which I think is great, so I don't have to spend a lot of time on that, but just show you how I put that into lambda functions that let me use name ranges to make this stuff a lot easier. So once you'd set that up, it was quite easy. So maybe just in terms of the setup, very similar starting point. I did that Unicode of the value. I named this hard-coded 9855 as my 0, nice. So that when I needed to subtract, then I could here say subtract 0, and that I ended up using a lot more. And that just gave me the numbers so that I didn't have to do the lookup. Although I think, as you said, the lookup was helpful. If you didn't know about this Unicode thing, we kind of gave it to you, which was helpful. And then one of the sort of fundamental starting points for me was defining a function called role split. So basically what I wanted to do is split out the roles, because all of the questions came with just what are your dice rolls.
Yeah.
And so I think you've basically covered this. Text split, the figures that come with the delimiters, the semicolon space, ignore blanks, and subtract my 0, and that just gives me the numbers. And the real help for that is that, so I've taken the dice that were on the screen, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. I've now converted them into numbers, and that sort of starting point, a role split. Funny enough, I actually named that as a formula named range, and so that then lets me say, role split now becomes a function to me. Role split of that, gives me the output, and I can use that as a function now. And so I've just created a function for myself in Excel, and then to answer level 1, I took the sum of role split the value, right? And that's that then started giving me the build up of those things. So I'll just put up in the screen here how I got the lambda to work. The lambda is what you need to put in the name manager so that you can use it. But that was really cool.
And that's not rocket science, right?
Yeah,
it's really not rocket science. So I mean, if you just think about it, so maybe even the Unicode text split, the Unicode in the 0 wasn't necessary. You could have had a normal X lookup or V lookup or index match in there, and you just it could have been an X lookup or a lookup and a text split, and that's it. That's all you needed to break it up, and then you sum it for level 1. So it was actually typically very, very simple, or it could have been very simple. Yes.
Yeah. And now this formula looks like super simple, right? Just sum up the role split of those values, which was quite cool. I will caveat and say that I didn't do this in 30 minutes because I was trying to figure out how lambdas work. But hopefully if I practice more, I'll be able to do it quickly, because I think what I really want to show is once I got to board 2, I'd basically set up the lambda that I needed to answer all the other questions with that thinking. Then that made it really simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go across to the board 2 sheet and just show you sort of how I came up with this, eventually came up with this sort of big thing over here. But I've tried to break it down into steps to just show you what my thinking was. And it's much the same as what you guys have already spoken about, right? So maybe just for context, I've got this role split where I've pulled in I think it's question, whatever it is, 11 or 21 or whatever, the first one in board 2. And then I'll show you how the scan function works in this case when I get there, and then the reduce function, how that works. And those sort of became sort of critical to getting to this position. But sort of just walking through step by step how the lambda is set up, I did the same thing. I unwound the board. So I just did a 2-col. Maybe a nice tip from my side here, which it seems like not a lot of people use this, but the clean function removes non-printable characters, so that gets rid of your line.
Oh, wonderful.
So
I learned something as well.
Yeah, I didn't have to do a substitute for character 10 and figure out what the character it was character 10 and not a space, and so just clean takes out all non-printable characters. So that was quite useful. All right, so that's unwound it. That's basically just your 2-col, and it's just putting everything in one big column that you've touched on. Then invert, Renier, I think this is what you were getting to on your at the end.
Yes.
So if you take the index of the sequence, but you use the sequence back to front, so you index the number of rows and you count from 1,000 down to 1, and so you basically, what you're saying is give me the 1,000th value, 999 value, 998 value, 9. So you just turn it upside down.
Because the -1 inverts it, right? The -1 makes it so the rows just basically counts how many rows there are, so it gets to 100, and then the -1 just runs from 100 backwards. So you take the 100th value, which is 1, bring it up to the top, and you invert it like that. Yes, and then you've got a nice clean sort of data set, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you could remove the snake and the ladder. And you've got numbers that's remaining. That's it.
Yeah. So I didn't use a count A. Same answer. The rows function just says how many rows are there in the range that you've got.
Simpler.
So I used sequence of I want how many rows there are in this case, and it was important to count the number of rows dynamically, as you said, because board 5 was 1,000, not 100. And so take the sequence of 100. And count 100 values starting from, start at 100 and go backwards by -1 each time. And that just gives you a sequence from 100 down to 1. And if you put that in an index function referencing that starting range, you basically just flip the range over. So I've called that invert. So I've inverted the unwind. Yeah. Then the start is just the text before the Steppies or the Pofadders. And you see I used another SP range here, which is I just named these two values SP. Yeah. So text before either of those two. And as you said, I think you were quite generous in this case that it actually didn't matter if it was a Steppie or a Pofadder. You treat them the same because you had the starting cell and the ending cell. So I came up with a start and an end. And that's so a good example is here, number 6, where you go from 6 to 40. So you can see here that this is splitting out number 6 and this is splitting out number 40. And I similarly used the if error on the end part. If there was no delimiter, there was no Steppie or Pofadder, then just give me the value that I was on. Because
that's cool.
In snakes and ladders, you roll the dice, you land on a cell. If there's no snake or ladder, you just stay on the cell, right? Yeah. And so the ultimate goal that I was trying to get to in my mind was a 2D array that says where am I going from and where am I going to, right? And this then just becomes a 2D standard array. And so if I landed on cell 1, I stay on cell 1. If I land on 2, I stay on 2. If I land on 6, I go to 40. And this I put in a VLOOKUP. And that's, to me, is a swear word these days. But actually, VLOOKUP in this case was easier than an XLOOKUP because I created a 2D array intentionally. Yeah. So it was VLOOKUP, the value, comma 2, end of story. Yeah. I wasn't trying to refer to the two ranges separately.
And that, to me, is the only sort of use case that remains for VLOOKUP is where you have to give it an index. You have to give it a number. That's the only reason why I still use a VLOOKUP is when I need to give it a number, and I sometimes need to give it a number dynamically, which is something I can't do with XLOOKUP. With XLOOKUP, I need to do an index and give a number if I had to refer to a specific column in the value, where or in the array, where with the VLOOKUP you could just give the number 2, which makes it simple.
Yeah. So actually, funny enough, now that I'm thinking about it, I probably could have done an XLOOKUP because I had my start and my end ranges. But anyway,
you could have.
In my head, I was coming up with a lookup array that had where was I and where was I going to. And so that
you didn't need the H stack. You could have gone XLOOKUP start and return end. But that's cool. I like it.
So I'm shooting myself in the foot, but maybe for the old timers out there, there's the good old VLOOKUP. So that's sort of my setup of this Lambda. And then, so this is now with a scan function. So here's my Lambda here. I'm essentially doing the VLOOKUP. I'll explain the A plus V now, but this is my from to. And I've in the name manager, I've gone and said, I need to give it the board number to pull up the right board, because that became important for rolling this out. But then I'm essentially saying, look up the place that I land on after my roll, look up in this 2D array, return me the second column, exact match. So the A plus V here is just with the way that the scan works is you give it a starting number. So we start on cell 1, and then it says, what are you incrementing by? So, and it's basically just iterating through this. So this is my role split, right? So it says, give me the 2 first. So take 1 plus 2. Now I'm on square 3. Do the VLOOKUP on 3. Am I moving anywhere, or am I staying at 3 with my from 2? And then 3 becomes my new starting point. Then plus 5. 5 goes to 8. Look up 5. There's no steppies or ladders on 5. Stay on 8. Then 8 plus 2 goes to 10. And I think 10, if I'm not mistaken, should then put me on 20. Let's check. Yeah, 10 goes to 20 on the board. So I got to 10 because I was on 8. Adding 2 is going to 10. But my VLOOKUP is saying I'm not actually on 10 anymore. I'm on 20 now because of the ladder, the steppy. And this is it. So the scan function just iterates through the roles and accumulates them with this A being my starting point and V being the sort of iteration, and just puts the answer back into the starting point every time and then iterates through. And so the scan is basically showing me, of my 10 roles, where did I land up on each role? Okay. And you can see it. So it's start on 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 5 is 8 plus 2 is 10, but I go up to 20 plus 2, 22. You get the idea. And then the reduce function is exactly the same as the scan function, same arguments, but the reduce function just gives you the last one. If you just, I think there are optional arguments to reduce, but the reduce just gives you the last one. So you can see with this one lambda that was also using the role split lambda, so it's kind of 2 lambdas, I had all of the positions that I got the final position. The benefit of having all the positions was I could figure out when I got to 100 with, later on who got there first kind of thing. And so this really set me up, to go and answer all the questions. So for level 2, what block does the player end up on? This was just reduce, like, give me the last value. And I had to put in a minimum of 100 because you can't go past 100 kind of thing, just to make sure I stayed there. So that, simple, same logic. Level 3, only one player. On which dice roll does the player finish the game? Does he get to 100 or beyond that? So it's the same scan function, exactly the same scan function. I'm just saying, give me the X match of 100. And then give me the next, the exact match or next smallest match kind of thing. So, give me basically where's the 100, where's the first instance of 100, and that tells you on which turn you got to 100.
So just a point there. I love X match because you only need 2 parameters. I use it all the time now. I don't use match anymore because I typically want to do an exact match. An X match is exact by default, but it also gives you other things like you have the ability to scan from the bottom up, etc. But you could have also done a min ifs, which is what I did. Min ifs is a bit simpler. It potentially makes a bit more sense for people to say min if. So you basically want to say what is the minimum roll number where if it is 100. And that's basically your answer on that. But I'll show my example as well.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Then level 4, you've got now the 2 players playing. Which player wins? So which one gets to 100 first? And that's really just running level 3 twice.
Yeah.
So it's just doing, give me the X match of the player 1's roll, or give me the X match, or give me the X match of the player's 2 roll. And here we had to cater for the option of neither of them or one of them not finishing. And when you want to do an X match to 100 and someone didn't finish, you run the risk that you pick up the guy that didn't finish because he's got a smaller number, potentially, the way that I set up my X match. And so I just did if you don't get to 100, put in 999 as an example. I think I had to make that 999 afterwards. But and then here it was just say, if the one is less than or greater than the other, then give me 1, otherwise 2. And basically which one got there first.
So I did the same. I also used the min ifs for this one. And when you use min ifs, if the player doesn't end up on 100, you get 0. So you can't take the min of the two, because you might, like you said, you can't say if the one is lower than the other, because 0 is less than anything else in this case. So I also use the triple nine as I think I said, if it's not 0, make it 999 or something like that. So, I mean, all of them in the end are simple.
Yeah,
that's the point, I guess.
And then level 5, what is the sum of the players that they end on? Again, here I just use the reduce function. The reduce, same lambda. The reduce gives me the last value, capped to 1,000 in this case. So what's the last value but limited to 1,000? And just I did them in 2 rows over here, and then I just summed them up. And so the point here that I'm trying to show is that, you know, I sort of challenged myself to do this, and I as I said, it took me more than 30 minutes to figure out how to do this stuff, because it's kind of the first time I did it. But with a bit of practice, this stuff now that I understand is actually not that difficult. And the lambda, it's not like I write the lambda from the equals to the closing bracket, right? You build it up as you do any other Excel function. You start from the inside and your logic, and you build it up and you build it up and whatever. But once you've got that one lambda, I could answer the whole question with that one piece of logic and just choose scan or reduce and look, where am I looking up in the range that I've generated. And so it was incredible to be able to just, once I cracked board 2, I could do the rest in about 5 minutes. It was really cool.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And that's I love it. And that also explains why Dim actually opts for the lambdas these days, because he figured it out and it makes perfect sense to him. So to someone who hasn't dabbled in the reduce and the scan and the lambdas and those things, and the birows and the bicols and those functions, they have no clue, and it looks like rocket science, right? It looks like computer science, and it is computer science in its core. But it's amazing because it's available in a tool that everyone has on their PC these days, right? And that's also, I spoke to one of the University of Pretoria professors or lecturers this week, and she said, well, all the students are still on Excel 2019, and I'm like, you have to fix that immediately, because like the difference between Excel 365, Microsoft can pay me afterwards for the royalties that for the sales that I make for them. But the difference between Microsoft 365 and Excel 2019 are more than 3 years now, 4 years by now, right? Because they update it weekly, monthly. If you're on the Insiders channel, you get all the new stuff like immediately. I'm on the Insiders on my personal laptop. I'm on the current channel on my work laptop. But it's beautiful because I can Control Shift V for paste special, for paste values. It's amazing. It changes my life. I don't have to go Alt ESV anymore. And now we saw, like I said, Joe McDade this week said there's a new sort of any stale functions that haven't calculated yet will actually show you a strike through. Makes perfect sense. So yeah, and the new Excel 365 gives you all the text before, text after, text splits. It gives you on the current channel, gives you the paste values. It gives you the dynamic arrays. It gives you lambdas. It gives you scan, reduce, bicol, biro, all those wonderful functions. And you can practice them a little bit, and it'll change your life. The way that you approach a problem in Excel in the future will be much simpler and would be much closer to actual computer programming, and that's beautiful because it's simpler than computer programming.
As you're pulling up, I mean the to call function was the starting point for this unwrapping of this board, right? And before we had to call, you would have had to come up with some really complicated index 2D array lookup, and then you have helper column saying you want to be in row 1, and then column 1, and then you unwinding, and you're probably using mod functions. So it was possible to do all of this stuff previously, and the guys that are, real Excel wizards, would have done it in their sleep anyway. It would have taken them a minute to write the formula, and they would have done it, and it would have looked like magic. But just having the to call function is like, it's just like logical, right? Okay, I'm taking this range and putting it in a column. Easy. Anybody can understand that. And that function is only like within the last, I can't remember exactly when it was released, but it's fairly recent, right? And so, as you say,
It might be a year already.
If you're not on 365 these days, you're like falling behind, like properly behind the curve.
Yeah, and it costs me. I buy Microsoft Family, and our whole family uses it on their personal laptops, and it's like $200 per computer per annum. Like it's a small change if I look at the value that it gives me, and that gives me the whole office. But anyways, let's not sell. Microsoft's big enough. We don't have to sell anymore. If I just show, I just want to condense this a little bit. If I just show you guys a couple of the things, like I said, this one, I just did it in one sort of column over here. I did the length substitute trick that we showed last week, and I just sort of put the number 6 in there. Made sure that I didn't cover the examples, and I just pasted that down across one empty column. Made sure that it actually covers both players in level 4 and 5. And I just did a sum of that. So the sum of that was the 1787. Then the number of pips.
It's useful to just to show that in your formula you can use that character, that dice character in your formula, right? So that's quite cool to see.
Yeah. So a nice trick is if I did a text split over here, a text split for the actual comma space, semicolon space, then I could just actually take a 6 from there. Okay, luckily there is a 6, and I could actually refer to that character, and then just go inside of that character and press F9, and that would actually convert it for me into the dice. So then I could just wrap that in inverted commas, and I could use it in the formula. So that's just a nice way to extract that information with F9, because F9 does a calculation within the actual cell. So yeah, good point there. And then for bonus question 2, the idea there was also pretty simple. I just basically pasted all the values going down. Sorry, all the dice running down, and then just did my my text split. In this case, I didn't need to do that if I named my ranges dice and values, because this would have just been dice and that would have been values. But I just did an X lookup and wrapped it in a sum with a comma space delimiter. Again, you don't have to have the comma and the space separate. You could have them together. So you could have multiple characters inside your text split. So you could remove spaces and semicolons in one, and that just gave me the value back. And I just did a global sum of all of them, and that gave me the 38,860. But also very simple. And then if I go to the final bonus question, the number of blocks on game board 2, I did that in a separate block as well. Firstly, took the board, then unwrapped it to a column, then did a text split with the snakes and the ladder. In this case, I used that into the curly braces, which equates to an array. So this is just a 1D array that I'm passing into the text split function. That splits it out, and basically gives me a number. And then I just basically said if this one is blank, don't do anything. Otherwise, take that less. I still use the left, but I mean your clean function would have been much easier, and you could just deduct this number from this number, get the 13, sum up the whole row, and that gives me 316. So that was bonus 3. For this first one, I did it in one formula. Again, this could have just been dice, and that could have been values on the named ranges. And again, it's just the sum X lookup text split. Very simple with a semicolon space. And then One of my friends actually told me he's going to buy me a dictionary because my definition of very easy and his definition of very easy is quite different. So I chuckled at that. But to me, I mean, some XLOOKUP text split, it needs to become part of your tool belt. And then I think it is easy, but maybe it's just me. For level 2 and 3, I actually built a separate model, but I mean, you could have built one model that, like Steyn showed. Ultimately, I did this exactly like I would have in a real world scenario. I had my 2 input values, and basically brought back my board with an indirect, so that I can watch it and see how the things actually unfold to see whether it's working and functioning like it should. Just a sequence on this on the count of this, but again, I could have used rows in your case. Again, here's my text split XLOOKUP for all the dice running down. The value of the dice is just a lookup to that lookup table, and then I actually used. Okay, I'll unpack that one now, but this is just the game board in a 2-row, and then there's my reverse sequence. In this case, I made it 100, 100, -1. But on my ultimate model, I think I made it the count A, or I could have gone columns in this case, counted the columns. And then when I built my data tables, I sort of made it 2D data tables. So you put your value in the corner there. I put the game running down, so that becomes my column input. And then I put the board number running to the right, that becomes my row input. And I could dynamically build little data tables to solve the answers for me. And that was the setup. And then the only sort of function that I had to write to do that, I actually used a let. And again, the only reason why I use a let is if I have something long that I want to use, but I have to use it twice in my resulting formula, or I have to use it more than once. Because that makes my ultimate formula a lot simpler, because I could just give it a name. So all that the let does is it gives it a name, and I called it number to go to, and I basically did a double dash to convert it into numbers, wrapped it in an if error for any places where we don't have any text after. My index function is used to just bring back the column reference of my array of values. I take the previous value, which is the 1, starts on 1, add the 3, and and that dynamically runs down. I passed my snake and my ladder in as an array, and essentially said, well, only take the first instance of where it finds the snake or the ladder. In this case, that wasn't even necessary. And I think I used the first instance where I still wanted to have the special character in there, but the clean function will change your life. And I just said, if you have an error, just add 0. And then I just basically said, take the minimum of, if number to go to is 0, so if we don't have a number that we need to go to, just take the sum of the previous one plus the next one, otherwise go to the number. Cap that at 100. So very similar to your scan or your reduce, but does the trick, right? And it did the trick for all 5 levels. So that was the only sort of formula that I had to write after sort of laying it out properly. But now thinking about it again, I mean, I know that when you only have half an hour, you've seen this the first time, you couldn't necessarily think about it properly. I understand working under pressure. I've seen this in the competition because I've been participating since the 2021 Open, and I understand working under pressure, but that's where experience comes in, and that's why Dim can solve things in 20 minutes, because he's got a lot of experience in this. But if I had to do it over again, I would set it up like this, and I would do my next calculation over here, and I would build my data table here, and I would solve all 5 levels in one, including bonus 1 and 2, you could solve with your model, and bonus 3 was as simple as we showed. So I guess that's my story. Maybe we can go, I don't know, Jason or Stan, if you guys have anything that you want to still share. Otherwise, we can go to closing thoughts.
Stan, I think you muted.
You're muted, yeah. Happens to us all, even in 2023.
Yes. You mentioned how you count the number of 6-pip dice by doing the length one and it's comparing the dice. So while we were speaking, I realized there's another way. You can use a text split where you split it based on the 6-pip dice, and then it splits it into each category. And then you can also just do a count A on it, and then -1. So if it's just one value, then there's no 6s. Whereas if there's more than one, then there was 6s there, which resulted in it being split.
Yeah, that just shows you there's always 100 ways to do it in Excel, right? There's always an easier way. There's always a simpler way. You have to find what works for you and what works quickly and what's memorable as well. Because especially if you're still not as experienced, you typically don't know about all the functions, and you have to find a simple way that makes sense for you. I mean, if we think about our friend Peter Pienaar, who's actually done really well in the competition thus far, he's a university student. He's never used Excel commercially. He's never used Excel in business or to earn a salary. And it's amazing that he's doing so well, but it's because he logically uses a simple method to do it. And he probably found an even simpler method to do this. And to him, sometimes he goes off on a tangent and he builds a massive lambda, but for the most part, he just finds an ingenuitive way like this, which is great. So yeah, in the end, I know that everyone who participates will learn from this. And even Dim, maybe he'll comment on this video afterwards and be like, "Oh, I didn't know that was so simple." Or like last week he took level 1 and he completely over-engineered it. I think he said he took a cannonball to take out I don't know what he said, but he completely over-engineered it, where you could have just done a left and a lookup.
I'm hoping the takeaway from this session is the clean function, because he did a substitute for character 10. So
exactly.
I was like, yes, I know something.
So actually, he took the mid function, split out the characters, took the character to see whether it's a line break or whatever, did a unit char on it or something like that, or a unit code on it, and then saw that it was a 10, so it was a line break. But you just used clean, which is beautiful. I didn't know that either, so you taught me something as well.
Yeah, thanks, Renier, and thanks for the walkthrough. The last comment from my side is, I think for people that are starting to see these like lambdas and lets and stuff, it looks like hectic, and it did to me as well. But I'd encourage you, I think Renier's example of the let function that you sort of wrapped up with about 5 or so minutes ago is a really good example. The let function is just, as you said, it's basically where you would have built a helper column. You're just giving that helper column a name and putting it in your formula. And that's the way to think about it, I think. And I'd encourage you guys to go and just go and rewatch that part of the video a couple of times and see that the let is just saying, I'm just going to name this helper column and just use it in my formula directly rather than build the helper column. And you could debate the merits of having helper columns and transparency and whatever. That's separate. In these competitions, speed is what's important. But it's not scary, right? It's stuff that we know, just putting it in a package, right? And that's really the power.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Jason. Any closing thoughts from you, Steyn?
No, nothing further.
Cool. Hope you guys enjoyed, and thanks, Steyn and Jason, again for your time this morning. I appreciate it. I'll make up with dinner or lunch, and we'll see each other soon. Looking forward to the finals. The finals will be at the start of September. We'll all hopefully be there in person, and we'll meet all the finalists, and we'll have a bit of a photo session, and a bit of catering and things as well. And then we'll see some smoke coming out of the ears of the participants to try and find our champion, crown our first South African Excel champion, and then then I think the sky's the limit. The competition will definitely happen again next year, and hopefully be a lot bigger, a lot bolder, and I hope this also becomes the start of a lot of our South African guys' journey. If I look at Gareth Watson, who topped out the rankings for both of the QRs together. Gareth has been a competitor on the global scale for a while now, and he's our number one from a South African perspective as well in the global competition. So Gareth does really well in these competitions generally. He also fell a bit flat in this case, in his mind, I think, because he typically scores really, really high, and he got to about halfway, and I think it's just running out of time. But again, if we unpack what we did, if you had it practiced, it was solvable in half an hour, I believe. It wasn't one of those cases where you should only be able to get 40%. So hope the guys learn from it. Hope even Gareth learned from it. Maybe he didn't know about the clean function either. And maybe the clean function was the golden bullet, or the silver bullet, I think that's the expression. All right, but have a good day, guys, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye bye.